Hi, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for watching my videos and subscribing to me recently. It's cool to have my very small little audience, so it's nice. Today is a very gruesome and sad story. It's a double murder. So let's get into the case of the murder of Toyin Salau and Victoria Sims. The subject of this video, Toyin, spent her last few weeks fighting for justice for the Black community after the death of George Floyd. I believe she deserves for her story to be heard by as many people as possible. She deserves for people to know her name and know the good she did for her own community and many others. I mean no disrespect to Toyin or her family by sharing her story. There's a lot of sort of complexities and allegations more than the usual case surrounding Toyin and her family, so it's a little bit harder for me to navigate because I don't understand the nuances. I don't have the correct story. I didn't know Toyin, obviously. I did my best to put together the life and death of Toyin that was as truthful and honest to her as possible. So if I get anything wrong or I pronounce something wrong, it's obviously not out of a place of malice. It's just human error, so please be patient, and if you want you can correct me in the comments below. I want to give a little trigger warning at the top though, because this case does involve sexual assault and family abuse allegations. Oluwatoyin Salau, I believe that's how you pronounce her name. My deepest apologies if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. For the purposes of this video, I'm just refer to her as Toyin because that's what a lot of articles or her friends or family refer to her as. So Toyin was born on August 27th, 2000 in Tallahassee, Florida. She was born to parents Victoria and Sewell. So Toyin had two siblings. She had a sister and a brother. There are a lot of allegations of abuse on Toyin's family to her, all four members of the family that I will go into a bit later, more in depth. Before I speak on sort of the information that's available about Toyin's early life, I want to just tell you that the information is from an obituary that I believe was written by Toyin's family or was created by them. So the information that's given would obviously be more biased in their favor, and if they were her abusers, I just want to sort of say that before I go into what they said about Toyin. So Toyin's family immigrated to America from Nigeria before Toyin was born. From my understanding, Toyin was raised in the church. She was raised Christian, and her faith was extremely important to her. Even throughout her Twitter feed, you can see that she's dedicated to her faith and she's dedicated to the Christian God. It is said that when Toyin was 9, she joined her church's choir as the youngest member. She also volunteered a lot of her time helping out her church's children department and went to weekly Bible studies. Toyin went to Buck Lake Elementary School, and while she was in elementary school, she received the NAACP's Dreamers and Doers Award. I'm not 100% sure what for, but she did receive it, so that's amazing. And then when she went to middle school, she attended Swift Creek Middle School. She joined the Black History and Cultural Brain Bowl. I'm not really sure what that is. Maybe it's an American thing. Not American. She graduated from Lincoln High School in 2018, and then afterwards she was accepted into the cosmetology program at Lively Technical School. And while she studied at her school, she started her own hairdressing business and built her own clientele. While she was still studying cosmetology at her previous school, she also enrolled in Tallahassee Community College in hopes of eventually transferring to Florida A&M University, or FAMU, to study law, because at this point she was very interested in sort of battling and solving a lot of injustices she saw in the world and in her community. So that was her plan. While studying at Tallahassee, she became a huge supporter and activist in the Black Lives Matter community. According to the obituary that I think her family wrote, in March 2020, like when quarantine just started, Toyin moved out to her own apartment, but as I'll get into a bit later, it's sort of confusing about Toyin's living situation because she was a little home insecure at one point, which sort of led to what happened to her. So it is confusing, but her family states that she moved out in March 2020 because she wanted to be independent. They stated that Toyin was still very close to her family and would often attend family functions. I also don't know how accurate this is because of the allegations against her family, but that's what it said. So after the death of George Floyd, this sort of reignited Toyin's activism within the Black Lives Matter community. So she began attending protests every day and sort of being a huge leader in her community. She began working with the TCAC, which is the Tallahassee Community Action Committee, in the last weeks of her life. And the TCAC defines itself as, quote, a local grassroots organization dedicated to fighting for peace, justice, and equality through direct action. She was also a huge advocate for Tony McDad, who was killed by Tallahassee police on May 29th, and he was a Black trans man. So I will include a link here of Toyin speaking about Tony and the movement itself.
Nah, can't nobody silence me. I just want, it's not that all lives don't matter, but right now, our lives matter. Black lives matter. Yes. Black trans lives matter. Yes. Trans lives matter. Yes. Because guess what? We all minorities, but right now, like, let's focus on the person who got killed. Tony McDade was a Black trans man. Okay? Amen. We not doing this. We doing this for him. We doing this for our brothers and our sisters who got shot, but we doing this for every Black person. Because at the end of the day, I cannot take my fucking skin color off. I cannot mask this shit, okay? Everywhere I fucking go, I'm profiled whether I like it or not.
So Toyin was last seen by family or friends on June 6, 2020. In the last few weeks of her life, it seemed that Toyin was home insecure and she was trying to find a place to live. I'm not really sure what was the catalyst for her home struggles, as it's not detailed online anywhere that I could find, but I just know that she didn't have a secure place to live at the time and was just sort of crashing with friends and things like that. But in Toyin's obituary, which I believe was dictated by her family, when it states that Toyin moved out in March 2020 to be more independent, this doesn't really align with Toyin's own narrative online, and it doesn't really make sense that if Toyin was home insecure or if financially she couldn't pay her rent or something like that, if she felt safe with her family, a normal 19-year-old that felt safe and comfortable with their family, if they were experiencing some sort of financial difficulties while studying, they could most likely move back with their family. So this sort of validates to me that maybe the allegations against her family are true because she didn't seem to feel safe enough to return home to them. And when you read Toyin's friends' accounts of Toyin's relationships with her family's account seems less and less truthful, especially the relationship that Toyin had with her mother and her brother. I will include some tweets that I pulled from Toyin's personal Twitter account that, in my opinion, I believe back up her friend's allegations that Toyin had a toxic home life. At the very least, it is sort of clear to me that Toyin didn't feel comfortable at home for whatever reason. Toyin's friends have recounted the alleged abuse that Toyin faced by her biological family on their own Twitter accounts. I'm going to give credit and link some of her close friends' Twitter accounts where I pulled some of these tweets from. If you want to support them or read more about them, but please don't send them any hate or just don't really message them about Toyin because it's disrespectful when someone's grieving to bring it up or blindside them or trigger them like that, so please don't do that. A lot of people say that Toyin didn't really have anyone that loved her, but to me it's very clear that a lot of Toyin's friends did love her and did value her, so I just want to say that. So I'm going to be pulling most of the tweets of the alleged abuse from Denia Hemphill, which was one of Toyin's closest friends, and she appears to be one of the most vocal on Twitter about Toyin's truth and Toyin's survival of the alleged abuse by her family. Denia alleged that Toyin was abused by all 4 members of her family, but especially by her brother, who allegedly sexually abused her repeatedly. They also said that her mother kicked her out right after Toyin graduated high school. It's unclear why or what caused this, but in Denia's recounting of events, it seems clear that the family knew, allegedly, about the sexual abuse being perpetrated against Toyin by her brother and didn't do anything. So if this is true, it's quite obvious why Toyin didn't feel comfortable going back to her biological family. So I'm going to put the tweets on the screen now for you to read yourself, and I will also link it below. Just to be cautious, just in case these abuse allegations are true, I'm not going to be linking any GoFundMes or fundraisers that are being held by Toyin's family, because I don't want to sort of associate Toyin or give money to her family if they did abuse her or harm Toyin when she was alive. Anyways, so going back to her final weeks. In her final weeks, Toyin didn't have a secure place to live, and her not returning to her family's house or her family home kind of suggests to me or validates the alleged abuse a little bit more, in my opinion. So I believe she was staying with friends, including Denia, just while she worked out, I think, a place for her to permanently stay. Denia stated that on June 4th, 2020, Toyin did sleep over at her house. And then it was also reported that around this time, around the last week or her last few days before she went missing, she did seek refuge at a local church, which was reported to be Wesley Impact Church. Another one of her close friends, Ashley LeRae, said that she went with Toyin to the church on Thursday, June 4th. Her friends said that they had helped her escape a house that she was being sexually abused or trafficked at. I'm not sure if this was her family home or if this was another home. It's not really clear to me through looking through the allegations or the timeline online which abuser Toyin was escaping, because as you realize, Toyin was very unfortunate and had a lot of very evil people around her that harmed her, so I'm not sure which perpetrator they're talking about her escaping at this point. Either way, Ashley said Toyin spoke to a lawyer on that Thursday. I'm not 100% sure what her meeting with the lawyer was about. I don't know if it was about the man that was sexually assaulting or sexually trafficking her at the house that she escaped from, or it was about a different incident. It's not clear to me. From here, I sort of assume that Toyin took most of her belongings out of the toxic house and moved them into the church for temporary safekeeping. As I already mentioned, on June 4, 2020, Toyin slept at her friend Denia's house that night, and then the next morning, the pair had breakfast with a group of their friends at a little cafe called Oillians Cafe, which is close to the FAMU campus. Then after they had breakfast, the group attended a sort of protest vigil for Tony McDade in the location where he was shot by police. So Denia and others said that they last saw Toyin on the afternoon of June 5th, 2020. They said they sort of lost track of each other in the chaos of the vigil. It seems that sometime between the time that Denia last saw Toyin and the early morning of June 6th, she was picked up by a man in a truck. She was offered a ride by a man in a truck. The next morning, Toyin tweeted about how she was sexually assaulted by the man that gave her a ride in the truck. I will show you the thread of tweets of Toyin recounting the sexual assault, and I will also link it below. Also, I'm going to give another trigger warning right now that I'm going to sort of go more in depth or in some detail about Toyin's sexual assault. So if that is triggering to you or you can't handle that for whatever reason, I will put a timestamp of when you can skip forward to get past my recounting. So essentially, this man in a truck picked up Toyin off of Saxon Street and offered her a ride to, quote, find someplace to sleep and recollect my belongings from a church I refuged to a couple days back to escape unjust living conditions. She said that Toyin usually wouldn't get in a truck with a man, but because she had nothing on her to protect herself from other people on the street late at night, and she had vision problems, so it was really hard for her to see at that time, and she didn't have her cell phone on her to contact anyone. I believe her cell phone was being held back at the church she was refuging at, so she got in the truck because she felt like it was her only option, and she prayed that this man had no bad intentions. I assume that he picked her up late at night because I guess the darkness was affecting her ability to see clearly. The man drove Toyin to his house or apartment where he allowed her to shower and then change into his clothes. The first red flag that Toyin said she noticed about the man was when he sort of peed with the door open, fully exposing himself to her and being like sort of comfortable doing that. Perhaps to dissuade this man from harming her, Toyin told this man about how she was a survivor of an attempted sex assault back in March 2020. Toyin claims that a 32-year-old man that she only identifies as Ivan, this 32-year-old man is from Ghana apparently, who is attending or was currently attending school at FAMU, tried to force Toyin to give him oral sex. When she refused, Toyin said that this man continued to harass her for quite some time, either through texting, like harassing her through text messages, or coming to where she lived at the time and banging on her door. So after telling this man about her previous assault, he asks Toyin if she wants a massage. Toyin says this happens after his roommate has fallen asleep. She says at this point she's sort of lying on her stomach, on his bed I guess, trying to calm herself down because she is experiencing symptoms of PTSD from her previous assault. Toyin says at this point the man began touching her body inappropriately until he climaxed or finished. When she felt he had fallen asleep finally, Toyin got out of bed and saw that the man was naked and sleeping, and she left his house still in his clothes and just tried to escape. Sometime after she left the house, I assume when she either got a hold of someone else's cell phone or went back to the church to get her own cell phone, she called the police to report the assault, but she said she couldn't correctly identify his house again because of her poor vision. So Toyin's final tweet, which I'll put on the screen now, was a description of the man that assaulted her, and her description was a black man in his mid-40s, lives in a gray painted duplex apartment style house, drives a white clean Silverado Chevrolet truck. So as I said before, June 6, 2020 was the last time a family or friend saw or heard from Toyin. On June 8th, 2020 at around 9:30 p.m. it is reported that Toyin went to a local homeless shelter called the Kearney Shelter to find a place to sleep. Because of COVID-19, that center is currently not housing people within their shelter. So after a brief intake with Toyin, they gave her the contact numbers of case managers she could call, and then through the case managers they could set up a temporary emergency shelter for her. But the center stated that to their knowledge, Toyin never got in contact with any of the case managers for emergency shelter. And after Toyin left the shelter, it is reported that she called an Uber, and I don't know where she went in the Uber to. They also stated that various family and friends of Toyin tried to reach out and contact the center for her whereabouts, but because Toyin was 19 years old and due to their confidentiality laws, they couldn't give them any information. I am unsure of when exactly Toyin was reported missing or by who she was reported missing by, but I do know that on June 9th, 2020, Tallahassee PD released a missing person poster for Toyin, which I'll put on the screen, and it states that she was last seen on June 6, 2020 in the area of Orange Avenue and Wanish Way, and that she could be in the area of Jakes and Patterson Street. Around 7 p.m. on June 10th, surveillance caught Toyin on camera at this sort of frozen dessert place called Big Easy Snowballs on Lake Ella. The shop's owner stated that Toyin came in and just asked him to use the restroom, and that was it. It appears that Toyin was alone at this time inside the shop, and this is the last time that Toyin is seen alive. So we're backtracking a little bit in the timeline. So on June 6, 2020, Toyin meets a 49-year-old black man called Aaron Glee Jr. at a bus stop on Appalachian Parkway. It is reported that Toyin left a local library at 5:51 p.m. and then arrives at a bus stop where she meets Aaron at around 7 or 6:07 p.m. So it's unclear to me who started the conversation, but Aaron and Toyin talked for about an hour, and during this conversation it is reported that Toyin told Glee about the assault that happened earlier that morning, and she also told him that she didn't have a secure place to sleep that night. So then he offers to take her back to his place that he lives so she can sort of bathe and try to figure things out. Glee didn't have a car, so he calls this older woman named Victoria Sims to pick them up. It is unclear the sort of depth or nuances of the friendship between Victoria Sims and Aaron Glee, but Glee's mother, Sandra Cutliff, said that Glee sort of thought of Victoria as his white grandmother, and that she sort of, took care of him from time to time. She would drive him places or like prepare meals for him, stuff like that. So Victoria Sims, also known as Vicky by loved ones, was around 74 or 75. There's different reports about her exact age, but she was a 74, 75-year-old woman. Similar to Toyin, she appeared to have a huge heart, and she was very active in Democratic politics, and she was very active in her community and in advocating for elderly rights. She also volunteered for a group called the AARP, which is an advocacy membership group that sort of advocates and explains to elderly people their rights and stuff like that. There are some reports that Toyin and Victoria actually met before June 6th at a Black Lives Matter protest, but I only saw this reported one time, so I don't think it's accurate. So I think the girls first met each other on the 6th when Victoria picked Glee and Toyin up from the bus stop. At around 7:07 p.m. on June 6th, Victoria picks up Toyin and Glee from the bus stop in her white Toyota. Just another warning that I'm going to sort of speak about sexual assault again, sadly. So again, we'll skip forward a couple minutes if you want to not hear about that. Sims dropped the two off at Glee's house a little while later, and I believe she left. And upon arriving at his house, which is sort of like dilapidated and in disrepair, I'll insert images of his house. Glee proposes having sex to Toyin. It is reported that Toyin refused and then Glee violently raped her. Glee stated that he held Toyin captive for 3 to 5 days in his house. He held her, I think her arms and her wrists were bound in one of the bedrooms, and he would occasionally let her out of the binds to eat or bathe. And throughout this 3 to 5 days, he would repeatedly rape Toyin. Police said he was highly intoxicated while holding Toyin captive, so he doesn't remember how long he held her captive. It's unclear to me how Toyin sort of went to the shelter on June 8th and then was seen at the snow cone place a couple days later. I don't know if she was able to escape these few times or if Glee was with her, like he was outside sort of intimidating her and that's why she never called the case managers, or I don't really know the context and there's no context available online. I also want to note here that Glee has a criminal record, an aggressive criminal record history that dates back decades, and on May 29th, he actually assaulted another woman. This woman was not Toyin and was not Victoria. So the story goes that Glee and this woman were drunk and they were sort of walking home or walking somewhere on the sidewalk. He proposes sex to this woman. She says no. So he starts hitting her. And then there was, I guess, sort of fortunately, an officer that was stopped at a red light nearby who saw Glee kicking this woman in the stomach as she was like sort of curled in a ball on the floor. So he had gotten charged and arrested for that, but was let out of jail and free to do what he did to Toyin and Victoria. It's also unclear to me if Glee rented or owned the house that he took Toyin to, which was located on Monday Road in Tallahassee, because there are some articles that say he was just a squatter there, but others say that he actually lived there. I don't know if this really matters, but I'm just telling you. And it's also unknown because of his intoxication, the exact date that he did murder Toyin, but I believe it was between June 11th and the 13th. It was only after Victoria Sims was reported missing by her family friends on the morning of June 13th, on Saturday, June 13th, 2020, that Toyin was even connected to Aaron Glee. Victoria was last seen on Thursday, June 11th, or last in contact with family on that Thursday, and then she was reported missing 2 days later. So police went to her apartment around 5 p.m. on Saturday, and they found it in disarray. It appeared that someone had robbed her because her friend stated that a lot of her electronics were missing from the house. Her car, the white Toyota that she drove Glee and Toyin in a week prior, was also missing from her apartment's parking lot. I believe that when Victoria's family or friends reported her missing, they also mentioned that she gave rides sometimes to a local man called Aaron Glee Jr. Perhaps their family or her family mentioned this because they thought he was a suspicious person. I'm not sure. Using a GPS trace on Victoria Sims' phone, they were able to locate the phone within 50 meters of Glee's house on Monday Road. When they arrived at his house, I believe it was around 9 p.m. when they arrived, they found Victoria's white Toyota stuck in the mud on his property. Court documents stated that, quote, "It appeared as though the driver was attempting to drive north of the stopping location but was unsuccessful, so perhaps Victoria was trying to flee. There was a white sheet covering the rear of the vehicle, including the license plate. The license plate was bent upward as though attempting to conceal the vehicle's identity. It is then reported that police go and knock on the front door, but no one answers, and they sort of break in because they are worried that Victoria is being held captive or is in imminent danger. So they search through the house, and it appears that Aaron is not currently in the house. But they do sadly find Victoria in one of the bedrooms. So Victoria is deceased under a white blanket that is covered in her blood, and her hands and her ankles are zip tied behind her back. So as I said before, Glee was not in the house at that moment, but police believe that he must have left recently, so he might be hiding the property nearby. That's what they sort of theorized, because they quote, or the air in the bedroom, quote, smelled of recently smoked cigarettes. So police brought dogs to the property shortly after to search and see if they could find Glee sort of in the foresty area nearby. And this is when they found Toyin's body. So they found Toyin's body 200 feet away from Glee's house, and she was discarded on his property, and he had put leaves on top of her to sort of disguise that there was a body there. And so in their search of the property, they also found Victoria's driver's license and a cell phone in one of the garbages outside of the house. They found a spent bullet casing in the front dirt driveway, and then they found a credit card on the barbecue grill. So residents in Glee's neighborhood who had been in contact with one of his cousins had stated that Aaron was fleeing. Aaron had bought a bus ticket using cash, a one-way bus ticket to the West Palm Beach area where he reportedly had a family. When he got off the bus in Orlando, Florida, the Orlando PD, who had been contacted by the Tallahassee police, intercepted him and sort of arrested him on the spot, and they reported that it appeared that his pants had blood stains on them. He was charged at that time with felony murder and kidnapping. When they looked through Victoria's phone records, they found that the last person she spoke to was actually Aaron Glee, and she spoke to him on Friday, June 12th at around 10 a.m. for around 2 minutes. After this call, she never responded to any calls or texts. Glee was arrested very early on Sunday, June 14th when he got off the bus, and he immediately started complaining about having breathing problems and blah blah blah. So they took him to a local Orlando hospital, and at the hospital he confessed to murdering both women to the officers that were guarding him. And then at a later time, when he called his mother, I don't know if it was in the jail or if he was still in the hospital, he also confessed to the murders to his mother. But when he called his mother, he gave her a sort of completely different version of events that left out the sexual assault and the burglary. I guess he was trying to make himself look better. He said that he strangled Toyin in a rage after she called him some racial slurs, including the N-word, after he refused to give her Molly. Toyin's friends have vehemently denied that Toyin would ever touch drugs. They said she barely ever even drank alcohol. So this is completely out of character, and I believe them. I think he was just lying to try to make himself sound better to his mother. I also saw reported that he said he killed Victoria also in a rage after she came to his house and called him a slob. It's not funny. I'm laughing because it's absurd. Obviously, both of these alleged motives are complete bullshit, and even if they were true, that's so stupid. I can't even begin to conceptualize why he thought that was like a good lie. Anyways, he actually murdered Toyin. He told the cops that he murdered Toyin because he felt like it was his only option to stay out of jail. Like I said before, he has a criminal record history dating back decades and decades, so he really knew that if he went to jail for kidnapping and repeatedly sexually assaulting Toyin, that he would most likely go away for a long time because he was a repeat offender. And he was already facing charges for his previous assault like a week earlier. So when confessing to the investigators, Glee said that he, quote, bound Toyin with rope in a manner that would kill her, and checked on her multiple times until he determined that she was dead. He then dumped her body outside of his house and covered her in leaves to try to sort of disguise that there was a body there, I guess. So meanwhile, or afterwards, it is believed that Glee goes to Victoria's apartment after talking to her on the phone. I don't know if she picks him up or he finds his own way there. Anyways, the police believe that he goes to her house, he robs her, takes her electronics to sell, I guess. It's then believed that he abducts Victoria by stealing her white Toyota with her in it and then drives both of them to his house. Sometime after this, he binds or bounds her ankles and her wrists behind her and then murders her. The exact causes of death of Victoria and Toyin have not been released to the public, so I don't know how Glee murdered Victoria, but I do believe that he just strangled Toyin until she passed. Aaron Glee Jr. is currently in jail awaiting trial for 2 counts of murder and kidnapping and then 1 count of sexual assault. His mother and some other activist lady have tried blaming the murders on Glee's poor mental health and inaccessibility to counseling and medication and stuff like that, but I don't know how true this is because there obviously is a huge issue with inaccessibility to medical care, especially in America. Like where I live in Canada, it's already bad enough, wait lists are already long enough, but we have free healthcare, which we still have more accessibility, so I can't imagine if you're an impoverished person or a low-income person trying to get mental health help. I'm not saying that's not an issue, but I think this is a complete red herring because it is noted somewhere, I saw it noted somewhere, that a few months prior to the murders, he was offered a mental health stay in some sort of hospital or rehabilitation center and he refused it. So I don't know how much you can blame on the state. And when he was asked if he would describe what he did to Toyin as rape, he said yes. So you can't blame it on his mental health because he was aware that what he was doing is wrong, and if you are aware that what you're doing is wrong, you are choosing to do it. So I don't think you can dismiss it as poor mental health. So I'm not even going to try to entertain that. And I'm not going to further that narrative or spread that narrative out of respect for both women. Both Toyin and Victoria had used their time on this earth to help and protect others in their communities and just be kind and spread kindness, and they both didn't deserve what happened to them. They were both bright lights and loud voices in their community, and they deserved to live long, fulfilling lives. Their murders were absolutely senseless and didn't need to happen, and Toyin herself was failed so many times. She was sexually abused and molested by her brother. She was failed by her whole family, and she was repeatedly assaulted by various men in her community that she had come into contact with, and like that's awful. And it's so hard for me to even swallow that she was treated so awfully and she still did so much good. And Toyin still doesn't have full justice. The man that assaulted her hasn't been found, and if her brother did molest her, he hasn't been charged, and this man Ivan also hasn't been charged to my knowledge. So all these men that did allegedly hurt or harm Toyin need to be brought to justice for Toyin to get the justice that she deserves. So I'm going to repeat the description of the man that assaulted Toyin on the morning of June 6, 2020. So Toyin described him as a black man in his mid-40s. He lives in a gray duplex apartment-style house and drives a white Silverado Chevrolet truck. I hope this man is caught, and I hope all the men that harmed these women are brought to justice so these women can finally rest. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It was a difficult story. I didn't love researching it. It was very difficult, but thank you for all the support on my videos, and I'll see you soon.